as juvenile lifers. I was arrested at age 15 and have been incarcerated now nearly 32 years. In 2012, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in the case of Miller versus Alabama that mandatory life without parole sentences are unconstitutional for juvenile offenders. The Miller decision also ordered that the 2,500 juvenile lifers impacted nationwide by the landmark decision be resentenced. According to the High Court, judges were now granted the discretion to impose term of years sentences or life without parole sentences when sentencing minors convicted of homicide. Life without parole was no longer the only sentence they could impose on juvenile offenders. However, the Supreme Court made it clear that life without parole sentences could only be reserved for rare juvenile offenders who are permanently incorrigible, forever incapable of change, and rehabilitation must be impossible. The court also stated that life without parole sentences for juvenile offenders should become uncommon. So far, approximately 217 juvenile offenders have been resentenced since 2012. 93% of them have received term of year sentences. Despite the U.S. Supreme Court ruling that their draconian sentences were unconstitutional 8 years ago, there are still 150 juvenile lifers awaiting to be resentenced. Prosecutors have abused their power by seeking life without parole sentences again for the juvenile lifers remaining to be resentenced. They have deliberately violated the 2012 U.S. Supreme Court criteria delineating which juvenile offenders are candidates to receive the extreme sentence. Michigan is now shamefully the state with the largest number of juvenile lifers still awaiting resentencing in the nation. Attorney General Dana Nessel can intervene in this situation by having her office take over the remaining juvenile lifer cases. She can then withdraw the motion seeking life without parole sentences against the remaining juvenile lifers awaiting sentencing and allow them to receive term of year sentences. Governor Whitmer can also ask the Attorney General to intervene if Nessel doesn't have the courage to do it herself. Allowing juvenile lifers to receive term of year sentences would give jurisdiction to the parole board to begin reviewing them for release consideration in the future. They would no longer be serving death by incarceration sentences and would have an opportunity to return to the community one day, like 95% of all incarcerated people eventually do. I am proud to say that of the 130 juvenile lifers who have been released during the past 8 years, none have reoffended. They have the lowest recidivism rate of any offender demographic in the MDOC. They are a proven, safe group of people to be released back to the community and pose no risk or danger to the public safety. This past Friday, Berrien County Trial Court Judge Charles Osada held a final hearing in my case to consider evidence about my growth, maturity, and capacity for change during my 3-decade incarceration. He will now make a ruling sometime before March 8th about whether he sentences me to a term of years or a life without parole sentence again. My legal team, several witnesses who testified on my behalf, and I provided an abundance of evidence about my capacity for change and rehabilitation during my court hearings, and made clear that I am clearly not a candidate for a life without parole sentence. We are hopeful for a positive outcome in the coming weeks. I want to also share that this past week, the MDOC announced that nearly 15,000 of the people incarcerated in Michigan prisons, nearly 40% of the entire population, have contracted COVID-19 to date. Half of all Michigan prisons are also currently on COVID-19 outbreak status. Prisons are a hellscape that have become vicious vectors for transmission of the deadly virus. The crowded living conditions, inability of incarcerated people to social distance in housing units, and lack of personal protection equipment made available to protect themselves is endangering the lives of vulnerable people who are powerless to extricate themselves from this crisis. I invite people to visit the webpage bit.ly.com/MishPR. That's bitly.com/MICHPR, and sign the 10-point Michigan Prison Reform Platform online petition calling on Michigan lawmakers to end double bunking in prisons, separate beds and housing units by 6 feet, and reduce the prison population to prevent people from being infected by COVID-19 and potentially dying. The petition also addresses 9 other important reforms we are asking lawmakers to pass to improve prison conditions and make them more humane for the thousands of human lives it cages. The petition website again is bit.ly.com/mishpr, bit.ly.com/MICHPR. Mass incarceration is ravaging communities of color and poor people. We must use our collective voice to demand bold change to our criminal justice system. Dehumanizing policies that ignore the inherent dignity of citizens are disgraceful and have no place in a civilized society. Dr. King opposed them then, and we have a moral and social obligation to oppose them now. You can find links to my articles or listen to my radio and podcast interviews about Michigan juvenile lifer resentencing delays, COVID-19 in Michigan prisons, or learn more about my case by visiting facebook.com/free.efren. That's facebook.com/free.efren. Thank you.
We want to thank Efrén Paredes, an outstanding activist, for that tape-recorded message. We also want to thank Elena Harada, the host of Beloved Detroit.